One day you will wake up, and nothing dramatic will happen. No warning, no announcement. Just a quiet realization that your body does not respond the way it once did. Your patience is thinner, your regrets louder, and time suddenly feels expensive. Old age does not arrive with cruelty, it arrives with honesty. It shows you exactly what you built and exactly what you neglected. Buddhism does not threaten punishment, it explains consequence. The body, the mind, the habits, the attachments you repeat daily are not small actions, they are seeds. And old age is the season where everything grows at once. What you do daily decides how hard old age will be. Not fate, not luck, not God's anger. Your daily choices. 1. The body remembers everything. In Buddhism, the body is not an enemy to be conquered, and not a toy to be abused. It is a temporary vehicle entrusted to you for a limited time. You do not own it, you borrow it. And like anything borrowed, it keeps a record of how it was treated. The body does not think, justify, or forgive. It simply responds. Every hour of movement strengthens it. Every hour of neglect weakens it. Nothing is lost, nothing is forgotten. Most people misunderstand pain. They treat it as an inconvenience instead of information. They silence it with distractions, medication, overeating, or denial. But pain is not the problem. Pain is the message. When you ignore it repeatedly, the body learns that subtle signals are useless, so it speaks louder. What begins as stiffness becomes limitation. What begins as fatigue becomes illness. The body is patient, but patience should not be mistaken for mercy. When you are young or even middle-aged, the body compensates. It forgives poor sleep. It tolerates excess weight. It adapts to long periods of sitting, stress, and neglect. This creates a dangerous illusion that nothing serious is happening. Buddhism warns against this kind of ignorance. Cause and effect do not disappear just because the result is delayed. Old age feels cruel not because the rules suddenly change, but because the grace period ends. Daily respect for the body is not about appearance, performance, or comparison. It is about acknowledgement. You move not to look strong, but because movement keeps circulation alive. You stretch not to impress anyone, but to remind the body that it still has space. You breathe deeply not as a technique, but as an act of presence. These small actions tell the body that it is seen and valued, not ignored until it breaks. Overeating, undersleeping, constant tension, and emotional suppression are not separate from physical decline. In Buddhism, the body and mind are not divided. Emotional avoidance tightens the body. Chronic stress shortens the breath. Unexpressed grief settles into the chest. Anger lives in the jaw and shoulders. When these patterns repeat daily, they become structure, not mood. Old age does not create these conditions, it reveals them. Gratitude toward the body is practical, not sentimental. You walk while walking is effortless, because one day it will require effort. You bend while bending is easy, because one day it will require assistance. You care for joints, muscles, and breath, because future freedom depends on today's attention. This is not fear-based thinking, it is clarity. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is not a threat, it is a fact. Ignoring facts does not make them kinder. What is neglected now does not disappear, it waits. And when the body finally collects its due, it does so without emotion, without anger, and without negotiation. Old age is not punishment. It is accounting. The body simply returns what it was given, nothing more and nothing less. 2. The mind becomes what it repeats. Buddhism does not describe the mind as something you control through willpower. It describes it as something you condition through repetition. What you think once has little power. What you think daily becomes structure. The mind is not shaped by what you know, believe, or promise yourself. It is shaped by what you return to again and again. Old age does not suddenly create a restless or bitter mind. It reveals the mental patterns you practiced your entire life. Most people assume peace will arrive later, when responsibilities lessen, when work slows, when life becomes quieter. This is a dangerous misunderstanding. A noisy mind does not calm down when life becomes slower. It becomes louder. When distractions fade, the mind fills the space with whatever it was trained to produce. If it was trained on worry, it worries more. If it was trained on regret, it replays the past endlessly. If it was trained on anger, it sharpens its judgments. Old age does not heal the mind. It removes the noise that once distracted you from it. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a field. Whatever you plant repeatedly will grow, whether you like it or not. Complaining may feel harmless, but daily complaining trains dissatisfaction. Constant comparison trains envy and inadequacy. Replaying past mistakes trains shame. Rehearsing fears trains anxiety. These patterns do not fade with time. They become habits, and habits become personality. By the time old age arrives, these patterns feel like who you are, when in truth they are simply what you practiced most. Many people confuse thinking with intelligence. Buddhism makes a sharp distinction between thinking and awareness. Thinking is repetitive and reactive. Awareness is spacious and observant. A life spent constantly reacting leaves the mind tense and brittle. A life that includes daily moments of awareness leaves the mind flexible and steady. This is why meditation is not presented as a spiritual achievement, but as mental hygiene. Just as the body needs daily movement, the mind needs daily stillness to release what it is holding. The mind also carries emotional residue. Unresolved anger does not disappear when the situation ends. It stays stored as tension and mistrust. Unspoken grief does not weaken with time. It hardens into sadness that feels permanent. When these emotions are avoided daily, they accumulate silently. Old age then becomes emotionally heavy, not because life was unfair, but because nothing was processed along the way. Buddhism does not ask you to suppress emotion. It asks you to see it clearly before it becomes your identity. Daily mental discipline does not mean controlling every thought. That is impossible and unnecessary. It means noticing what you repeatedly feed. Do you return to resentment or release it? Do you relive the past or stay with what is here? Do you catastrophize the future or ground yourself in the present moment? These choices seem small, almost insignificant, but they are not. They are training sessions. The mind you will live with in old age is the mind you are training today, whether you are aware of it or not. A calm old age is not a gift. It is the result of thousands of quiet moments of awareness, restraint, and honesty. Buddhism does not promise a mind free of thought. It promises freedom from being ruled by thought. That freedom is built slowly, patiently, and daily. Ignore this, and old age becomes mentally exhausting. Practice it, and old age becomes a place of clarity rather than regret. 3. Attachment is heavy to carry into old age. In Buddhism, attachment is not defined as love, responsibility, or commitment. It is defined as clinging to what is impermanent and demanding that it remain unchanged. This distinction matters because many people grow old believing they are suffering because life took something from them, when in truth, they are suffering because they refuse to loosen their grip. Old age exposes attachment more clearly than any other stage of life, because change becomes unavoidable and constant. Throughout life, attachment often hides behind success, routine, and identity. You become attached to strength because it makes you feel capable. You become attached to usefulness because it makes you feel needed. You become attached to roles, titles, opinions, and control because they give you a sense of certainty. While you are busy, productive, and physically able, these attachments feel harmless, even motivating. But Buddhism warns that what feels like stability today may become suffering tomorrow if it is not held lightly. The problem with attachment is not that things change. Everything has always changed. The problem is the demand that they should not. When aging begins to take what you assumed was permanent, attachment turns into resistance. Resistance turns into frustration. Frustration turns into suffering. The body weakens, and the attached mind interprets this as failure. Memory fades, and the attached mind interprets this as humiliation. Independence reduces, and the attached mind interprets this as loss of worth. Old age becomes painful not because these changes occur, but because the mind refuses to accept them. Buddhism teaches that clinging creates a constant background tension. You may not notice it when you are young, because energy and distractions hide it. But as energy declines, tension becomes obvious. An attached mind spends enormous effort trying to preserve what cannot be preserved. It compares the present to the past, judges itself harshly, and resents reality for not cooperating. This internal struggle drains peace more than physical pain ever could. Attachment also distorts identity. When you define yourself primarily through what you can do, what you own, or how you are seen, aging feels like erasure. The mind panics because it equates change with disappearance. Buddhism offers a different view. You were never the body, the role, or the reputation. Those were conditions, not essence. Old age hurts the most when identity was built on conditions rather than awareness. Daily practice of letting go does not mean becoming passive or detached from life. It means relating to life without gripping it tightly. You still care, but you do not cling. You still engage, but you do not demand permanence. This practice begins in small, ordinary moments. Accepting inconvenience without anger. Allowing others to disagree without needing to win. Letting plans change without collapsing emotionally. These moments train the mind to bend instead of break. Many people wait until loss forces them to let go. By then, the habit of clinging is deeply ingrained, and the release feels violent rather than natural. Buddhism encourages voluntary letting go long before it is required. This does not weaken you. It prepares you. A mind trained in letting go meets aging with curiosity rather than fear. It adapts rather than resists. It finds meaning beyond control. Attachment also intensifies fear of death. The more tightly you cling to identity, comfort, and certainty, the more terrifying impermanence becomes. Old age brings death closer, not to punish you, but to clarify priorities. A detached mind does not rush toward death, but it does not panic at its presence. It understands that endings are not personal insults. They are part of the structure of existence. One of the cruel illusions attachment creates is the belief that happiness existed in the past and has now been lost. This keeps the mind trapped in comparison. Buddhism teaches that happiness is not located in time. It arises from the quality of attention in the present moment. An attached mind cannot access this because it is always measuring, remembering, and resisting. Old age then feels empty, even when it could be rich with insight and simplicity. Letting go daily lightens the future. It reduces the emotional baggage you must carry when physical strength declines. It creates space for acceptance, gratitude, and peace. This is not resignation. It is wisdom. Old age becomes unbearable when attachment turns every change into a personal tragedy. It becomes gentle when change is met with understanding rather than protest. Buddhism does not promise comfort through control. It promises freedom through release. What you practice letting go of today determines how heavy tomorrow will feel. Old age is not the enemy, attachment is. 4. Discipline is compassion for your future self. Most people think discipline is something you use to force yourself through life. Buddhism sees it differently. Discipline is not punishment, it is not rigidity, it is not self-control driven by fear. Discipline is care extended across time. It is the ability to act today with awareness of tomorrow, even when tomorrow feels distant and unreal. Old age reveals very clearly who practiced this kind of care and who relied on comfort instead. The human mind prefers immediate relief over long-term well-being. This is not a moral flaw, it is a natural tendency. Buddhism does not shame this tendency, but it does warn about it. Every time you choose ease over effort, distraction over presence, indulgence over restraint, you are making a trade. The cost is not visible immediately, which is why the trade feels harmless. Old age is where the bill becomes visible. Discipline is misunderstood because people associate it with intensity and aggression. In truth, sustainable discipline is quiet and repetitive. It is going to bed when stimulation is tempting you to stay awake. It is eating in a way that supports the body rather than numbs the mind. It is moving the body even when motivation is absent. It is sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. These actions do not feel heroic. They feel ordinary. That is why they work. Buddhism emphasizes right effort, not extreme effort. Right effort means consistency without cruelty. Many people oscillate between indulgence and punishment, comfort and guilt. This creates instability. Discipline, when practiced correctly, creates rhythm. Rhythm creates trust. Over time, the body and mind learn that they are supported rather than exploited. Old age becomes less frightening when your system has experienced decades of steady care rather than cycles of neglect and repair. One of the greatest lies people tell themselves is that they will become disciplined later. Later, when life is calmer. Later, when motivation appears. Later, when circumstances improve. Buddhism dismantles this illusion by pointing out that later is built from now. The habits you avoid today do not suddenly become easier tomorrow. They become harder because the cost of avoidance accumulates. Old age is unforgiving to those who waited for the perfect moment to begin. Discipline also protects mental clarity. A mind without structure becomes scattered. A scattered mind becomes anxious. Anxiety intensifies with age when uncertainty increases and energy decreases. Simple daily disciplines, such as regular routines, intentional pauses, and mindful consumption of information, reduce mental noise. They do not eliminate difficulty, but they make it manageable. Old age punishes chaos far more than it punishes simplicity. In Buddhism, discipline is inseparable from wisdom. You restrain yourself not because desire is evil, but because you understand its consequences. You do not eat mindlessly because you respect the body's limits. You do not speak impulsively because you understand the weight of words. You do not exhaust yourself because you recognize that energy is finite. This understanding transforms discipline from force into choice. Many people associate freedom with the absence of rules. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Freedom comes from self-regulation. A person who cannot regulate sleep, emotion, appetite, or attention is not free. They are reactive. Old age exposes this brutally. When the body weakens and external options shrink, inner discipline becomes the difference between dignity and dependence. Discipline is also an act of self-respect. When you keep small promises to yourself, trust builds. When you repeatedly break them, confidence erodes. Old age amplifies this internal relationship. You either live with quiet self-respect or with constant self-reproach. No external validation can fix this. It is the result of how you treated yourself daily when no one was watching. Compassion for your future self does not require dramatic sacrifice. It requires honesty. It requires asking again and again whether today's choice is supporting or undermining the person you are becoming. Buddhism does not demand perfection. It demands awareness. Discipline guided by awareness is gentle, firm, and deeply human. Old age is not softened by luck or positive thinking. It is softened by decades of small, disciplined actions that accumulated silently. What feels restrictive now becomes liberating later. What feels difficult now becomes protection later. Discipline is not something you lose with age. It is something that carries you through it. 5. Unresolved emotions age with you. Emotions are not fleeting experiences, and they are not meaningless flashes of the mind. In Buddhism, they are signals, teachers, and record keepers all at once. Every moment of anger, grief, fear, or resentment leaves a trace not in some invisible ledger, but in your body, in your mind, in your patterns of thought and behavior. Most people treat emotions like passing storms. They expect them to arrive, rage for a while, and then leave. But when emotions are ignored or suppressed, they do not leave. They settle. They accumulate. They harden. They age with you. Consider anger. The person who allows irritation, frustration, or resentment to build daily carries a weight they cannot see. When they are young, energy and distraction hide the consequences. They vent occasionally or push the feelings aside and think that is enough. But the mind and body remember. Tension stores in the shoulders, the jaw, the chest. Sleep becomes restless. Reactions become sharper. The emotional energy that is unprocessed begins to run the life silently. By the time old age arrives, every unresolved argument, every unspoken insult, every moment of silent bitterness has crystallized into rigidity, exhaustion, or physical pain. The mind does not forgive. The body does not forgive. Grief is no less patient. The loss of someone, something, or some dream is never fully finished if it is never acknowledged. Suppressing grief under distraction or busyness is like piling leaves in a corner of a room and pretending they are gone. Eventually, they rot and fill the space with an invisible stench. Old age exposes this. The person who did not allow themselves to feel grief fully experiences a deeper heaviness, an ache that no medicine or distraction can soothe. Buddhism emphasizes mindfulness of suffering, not indulgence in it, because awareness allows the emotion to move through you rather than lodge in you. Fear, too, is a quiet thief of peace. Daily avoidance of discomfort, anxiety, or uncertainty strengthens the nervous system's sensitivity. Small daily acts of avoidance, dodging confrontation, postponing decisions, numbing with entertainment train the mind to interpret normal challenges as threats. When old age reduces energy, independence, and control, the fear that has been cultivated for decades manifests as panic, indecision, and mental paralysis. Buddhism teaches that fear is not defeated by fighting it, but by witnessing it, understanding its impermanence, and choosing action despite its presence. Unspoken regret and guilt are perhaps the heaviest burdens. They linger in silence, often invisible to others, but never invisible to the self. The person who says, "I'll make it right later," may believe time will heal the wound. But the Buddha teaches that delayed resolution often worsens suffering. The emotions that are unaddressed daily calcify, and when the body and mind slow with age, their pressure becomes unbearable. You cannot outrun these emotions. You cannot negotiate with them. You can only process them, recognize them, and allow them to pass while you are capable of doing so. Daily honesty with oneself is not easy. It requires courage that few are willing to cultivate. It requires sitting with discomfort, naming the emotion, and allowing it to exist without letting it dictate behavior. It requires a willingness to confront the truth about your actions, your omissions, and the ways you have hurt others or yourself. This is not indulgence. This is practice. This is preparation for old age. Each time an emotion is acknowledged and processed, the burden lightens. Each time it is ignored, the weight grows heavier, invisible until it becomes undeniable. Many people imagine that old age will be soft, that wisdom will naturally dissolve pain. Buddhism tells us otherwise. Wisdom is not a cure, awareness is. If emotions have been ignored for decades, old age magnifies them, amplifying anger, anxiety, and sorrow, and often leaving the person unable to respond with clarity or compassion. But if the mind has been trained to notice, the heart has been trained to release, and awareness has been cultivated, old age becomes less of a punishment and more of a reflective space. One can meet life's final chapters with clarity, with calm, and with an understanding that the emotional storms of the past were only obstacles, not definitions of self. Practicing emotional awareness daily is deceptively simple but rarely easy. You do not need to relive trauma. You do not need to dramatize your pain. You simply need to notice, name, and allow. When frustration arises, pause and acknowledge it. When sadness arises, breathe and recognize its presence. When regret arises, note it without clinging. These moments, repeated over years, create resilience. They create a mind that carries its history without being crushed by it. They create a body and spirit that are lighter because the emotional weight has been distributed, processed, and released incrementally. Old age is unforgiving to the person who avoids their own emotions, but it is merciful to the person who has practiced awareness. Merciful not because life changes, but because the mind has been trained to observe, release, and remain steady. Emotions will still come, challenges will still arrive, physical decline will still occur. But the internal world will be less reactive, less chaotic, less burdened by accumulated suffering. Emotional awareness, cultivated daily, is one of the most profound acts of preparation for old age. It ensures that the mind and heart remain as free and capable as possible, even when the body begins to weaken. Ultimately, Buddhism teaches that emotions are neither good nor bad. They are signals of life, of attachment, of perception, and of care. The measure of peace in old age is not the absence of emotion, but the absence of avoidance. What you fail to face today becomes a heavier presence tomorrow. What you face today becomes strength, clarity, and a capacity for serenity. The mind carries the weight you train it to carry, and no one else will bear it for you. Old age punishes no one, but it amplifies every choice you have made with your mind and heart. Every suppressed anger, every unprocessed grief, every hidden fear, every unresolved regret, all of these accumulate and speak with unmistakable clarity as time passes. Daily honesty with your emotions is not optional. It is preparation. It is care. It is the most practical, compassionate, and effective form of wisdom you can give yourself. 6. How you treat others becomes your inner world. In Buddhism, the mind is not separate from action. It is not enough to cultivate thoughts or discipline the body. How you interact with the world leaves impressions that shape the life you will inhabit decades later. Every conversation, every gesture, every moment of impatience, judgment, or unkindness is recorded in the subtle architecture of the mind. When old age arrives, you do not meet the world you expected. You meet the world you created, and often the most profound element of this world is not external, it is internal. Many people believe that relationships are external, temporary, and separate from the mind. Buddhism shows that this is a dangerous illusion. The way you treat others shapes your emotional climate, your expectations, your peace, and your capacity for joy. A daily pattern of harshness, criticism, or indifference hardens the heart and mind. You may not notice the effect in youth or middle age because energy and distraction mask it, but over decades, the habitual mind of judgment and impatience becomes the dominant environment in which you live. When old age diminishes distractions, the only world left is the one you carried inside. Consider patience, a small daily choice to listen when you are irritated, to wait when your ego demands control, to accept imperfection in others might seem insignificant. Yet repeated thousands of times, these choices cultivate tolerance, kindness, and calm. Conversely, a day spent dismissing, criticizing, or resisting others creates friction in the mind. Friction repeated daily accumulates like tension in a machine. By the time the body weakens, the mind stiffens. Old age punishes those who practiced impatience, not because the world is cruel, but because their inner climate has been created from their own choices. Kindness functions similarly. Acts of compassion are not merely ethical, they are transformative. They reinforce trust, humility, and generosity within the self. Every small act, repeated consistently, strengthens the mind's capacity to remain calm and expansive in the face of decline. Buddhism teaches that the merit of such actions is not in what is given to the other, but in what is cultivated internally, a mind and heart that are capable of containing peace even as life shrinks. Old age is more forgiving to someone whose inner world has been irrigated with kindness than to someone whose inner landscape is dry with selfishness. Speech is especially revealing. Harsh words leave marks not only on those who hear them, but on the speaker's own mind. Criticism, sarcasm, gossip, and impatience are absorbed into memory and habit. The repetition of unkind speech cultivates defensiveness, irritability, and inner hostility. Old age magnifies this. Words left unmeasured decades ago echo back, shaping thought patterns, intensifying irritability, and coloring perception. Conversely, measured, considerate speech trains clarity, patience, and equanimity. The voice you use daily becomes the echo you live with when external conversation dwindles. The Buddha emphasized that no one is isolated. Your mental state is entwined with those around you. Repeated harm, neglect, or disregard toward others generates stress, mistrust, and bitterness internally. These are not abstract consequences. They manifest physically and emotionally. Tension gathers in the body, sleep becomes restless, digestion falters, and the mind remains on high alert. Old age amplifies these patterns because external stimuli are fewer and your inner world becomes more prominent. Those who sow negativity daily encounter a harsher internal environment later. Those who sow patience, empathy, and understanding cultivate a refuge within themselves that is resilient, stable, and calm. Daily reflection is key. Buddhism teaches that awareness of actions is as important as the actions themselves. Before speaking, before acting, consider, is this reinforcing kindness or friction in the mind? Will this deepen attachment, resentment, or fear, or will it cultivate freedom, understanding, and peace? These moments, seemingly trivial in youth, compound over decades. Old age is not surprised by your choices. It simply mirrors them back with stark clarity. Generosity, humility, and forgiveness are also tools of preparation. Letting go of grudges, helping without expectation, and acknowledging the limitations of others daily shapes the mind in ways that persist when energy and health decline. The older you get, the less external control you have over life circumstances. The only domain that remains fully under your care is your own mind and how it has been trained through interactions with others. Neglect this, and old age is lonely, angry, and bitter. Attend to it, and old age becomes reflective, peaceful, and connected. Compassion for others is inseparable from compassion for yourself. When you cultivate generosity, patience, and kindness daily, the internal climate you inhabit becomes forgiving, resilient, and spacious. When you cultivate judgment, criticism, and indifference daily, your internal climate becomes harsh, narrow, and unrelenting. Old age magnifies these tendencies. The world does not need to change. Your mind, trained over decades, either supports you or undermines you. Ultimately, Buddhism reminds us that the outer world and the inner world are reflections of each other. How you behave toward others is inseparable from how you behave toward yourself. A mind steeped in unkindness, impatience, or attachment to judgment experiences old age as conflict, restriction, and suffering. A mind steeped in generosity, patience, and empathy experiences old age as calm, dignity, and clarity. The lesson is simple yet profound. Every interaction matters. Every word, every gesture, every small choice in your daily life becomes the soil in which your old age grows. You cannot outsource this preparation. You cannot delay it. What you cultivate today is what will sustain or punish you decades from now. Old age does not forgive neglect, and the mind shaped by neglect will make that unforgiveness unmistakable. Your inner world is created by how you treat others. This is not abstract philosophy. This is practical, lived truth. Every act of kindness builds space. Every act of harshness builds confinement. Old age amplifies what you have built. This is not punishment. This is natural law. The mind becomes the world you must live in, and nothing you own, earn, or control externally can replace the landscape you have cultivated internally. The person who treats others with awareness, patience, and care daily experiences old age not as isolation, but as reflection. They meet the end of life with dignity because the mind they carry is spacious and light. Those who have allowed harshness, impatience, and indifference to define daily interactions find that old age is not gentle. It magnifies the habits they practiced, and the weight becomes unavoidable. Old age does not arrive quietly to reward or punish. It arrives to reveal. The person you are now, in how you treat others daily, is the person you will inhabit later. Buddhism teaches that awareness, empathy, and kindness are not just moral virtues. They are practical tools for shaping the quality of the life that remains when everything external begins to fade. 7. Awareness is the only true preparation. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is the fundamental truth of existence. Nothing lasts, nothing remains fixed, nothing can be held forever. Yet most people live as though life is permanent, as though the body, mind, relationships, and opportunities are infinite. Awareness is the practice of recognizing this truth daily, of observing what is happening within and around you without denial, without escape, and without self-deception. Awareness is not a technique, not a goal, not a checklist. It is a way of being, a continuous presence in the life you are living now, with clarity and precision. Old age punishes those who have ignored this. It rewards those who have cultivated it. To live without awareness is to drift. You perform actions, speak words, and make choices largely unconsciously. You react, you accumulate habits, you store regrets, you cling, and you push away. Your life becomes a series of automatic responses to circumstances rather than deliberate engagement with reality. The problem is not that life is difficult. The problem is that unconscious living leaves the mind and body unprepared for the inevitabilities of aging. When energy fades, when health declines, when relationships change, the untrained mind panics. The body feels heavier, the heart feels restless. Awareness practiced daily creates a buffer against this chaos. Awareness begins with noticing what is. This seems simple, yet it is profound. Notice the breath. Notice tension. Notice emotion. Notice thought. Notice behavior. Notice the impact of your words and actions on yourself and others. Notice the passage of time. In Buddhism, this noticing is not judgmental. It does not criticize, justify, or demand. It simply observes. Observation allows insight. Insight allows choice. Choice allows freedom. Freedom, practiced daily, is what protects the mind and heart as the body inevitably weakens. Awareness is intimately connected with impermanence. To be aware is to see clearly that each moment is fleeting, that nothing will remain exactly as it is. This includes your strength, your independence, your health, your energy, your loved ones, and even your thoughts. The moment you recognize that nothing is permanent, you stop clinging. The moment you stop clinging, you reduce suffering. The moment suffering is reduced, the mind becomes lighter. Old age becomes less of a threat and more of a mirror, reflecting what has been practiced, what has been cultivated, and what has been neglected. Most people underestimate the power of small daily acts of awareness. They assume that only dramatic meditation, long retreats, or profound revelations matter. Buddhism shows that consistent attention in ordinary life is far more transformative. Pausing to notice the breath during tension, observing a fleeting thought without following it, acknowledging the body's limits, recognizing emotions as they arise, choosing patience in interaction, these are all daily practices. They are not flashy, they are not dramatic, and they are not immediately rewarding. Yet, over decades, they accumulate into a mind that is calm, resilient, and spacious when old age arrives. Awareness is also the antidote to regret. Regret is one of the heaviest burdens to carry into old age because it anchors the mind in what cannot be changed. Awareness shifts the focus from what has been lost to what is present. It teaches the mind to see clearly, to respond rather than react, to accept rather than resist. Awareness does not erase past mistakes, but it transforms their weight. A life lived with awareness carries the past as knowledge and insight, rather than as chains that bind the heart. Emotional clarity is inseparable from awareness. A mind trained to notice thoughts and feelings as they arise becomes capable of processing them in real time. Anger does not fester. Sadness does not calcify. Fear does not dominate. Regret does not immobilize. Each emotion is met, acknowledged, and allowed to pass. Over time, this practice creates a mind and heart that remain agile, peaceful, and capable of presence even when the external world diminishes. In old age, this skill becomes invaluable. The body may weaken, circumstances may change, but the inner climate remains steady. Awareness also sharpens attention to the present. Most suffering arises from dwelling on the past or projecting into the future. Buddhism teaches that these tendencies are habitual and that life occurs only in the present moment. By practicing awareness daily, you train yourself to inhabit the present fully. You notice the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of your breath, the tone of a friend's voice, the sensations of the body. These moments, seemingly ordinary, accumulate into a life rich in perception, detail, and vitality. Old age magnifies this richness because the distractions of youth fade, leaving the mind free to inhabit what it has learned to notice. Discipline, compassion, attachment, and emotional awareness, all the lessons so far are supported and amplified by awareness. Without it, even the most consistent practices lose their effect. With it, even the smallest effort is magnified. Awareness acts as the lens through which every choice is examined, every habit is corrected, and every moment is fully utilized. It creates coherence between body, mind, and heart. It transforms aging from a slow decay into a reflective journey of clarity and insight. Daily awareness is not passive. It is active presence. It is listening without immediate judgment. It is observing without escaping. It is acknowledging reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. It is engaging life fully, moment by moment, without letting distraction, denial, or habit dull the experience. When old age arrives, the mind trained in this way is resilient, clear, and peaceful. The mind untrained is anxious, reactive, and burdened by accumulated ignorance. Ultimately, the lesson is simple but profound. Old age is inevitable and it is unforgiving, but suffering in old age is not inevitable. What you do daily, the attention you bring to body, mind, emotions, actions, and interactions creates the quality of the life you will inhabit later. Awareness is the final, unifying lesson, because it is the framework through which all others function. It is the cultivation of presence, clarity, and understanding in every aspect of life. It is the practice of seeing reality as it is, moment by moment, choice by choice. Old age punishes no one, but it magnifies everything. It reflects the consequences of what was practiced and what was ignored. Awareness is the only tool that allows you to meet it with clarity rather than fear, with calm rather than chaos, with insight rather than regret. It is not easy and it is not instant, but it is the most powerful preparation you can cultivate. It turns ordinary life into a training ground, ordinary moments into lessons, and the passage of time into wisdom. To practice awareness is to live fully now, so that when old age comes, you do not regret what you ignored, you do not suffer from what you neglected, and you do not cling to what was never yours to hold. Awareness ensures that the mind remains spacious, the heart remains calm, and the inner world remains steady even as the external world fades. This is the essence of preparation. This is the culmination of practice. This is the quiet power that allows old age to be faced not as punishment, but as truth. Old age is not a distant event. It is a consequence that grows quietly with each day, each choice, each thought, and each action. It is not shaped by luck, by fate, or by chance. It is shaped by what you practice daily. Your body carries the consequences of care or neglect. Your mind carries the imprint of repeated thoughts and habits. Your heart carries the weight of unprocessed emotions. Your attachments create either freedom or suffering. Your discipline builds strength. Your relationships shape your inner world, and awareness ties it all together. If you have ignored these truths, old age will arrive with clarity, impartial and unforgiving, reflecting everything you overlooked. If you have practiced them, even in small, quiet ways, old age will arrive with gentleness, reflection, and insight. Every breath, every choice, every small act of presence matters. Every day is training, every moment an opportunity to plant seeds that will sustain you decades from now. Do not wait. The time to care for your body is now. The time to train your mind is now. The time to process emotions, to practice discipline, to cultivate kindness, to loosen attachments, and to live with awareness is now. What you do daily is not small, it is everything. The life you will inhabit when energy fades, when strength diminishes, and when time feels more precious than ever is being shaped by what you do today. Old age is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Choose wisely, practice consistently, and live with awareness. Build a life that, when reflected upon, will feel full rather than empty, calm rather than chaotic, and free rather than burdened. Let every day be an act of preparation, every moment a lesson, and every choice a gift to the person you will become. In this practice lies the quiet power to face old age, not with fear, but with clarity, dignity, and peace.